I will open with a peace chant. Om apyayantu mamangani vakranaschakshushrutramato balamindriyani tu sarvani sarvam brahmopanishadam maham brahmanirakuryam mama brahmanirakarut anirakaranamastu anirakaraname astu Tadatmani nirateya upanishatsu dharmaste moye santu he moye santu Om Shanti 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 Om. May quietness descend upon my lips, my speech, my breath, my eyes, my ears. May all my senses wax clear and strong. May Brahman show himself unto me. May I never deny Brahman, nor Brahman me. I with him and he with me. May we abide always together. May there be revealed to me, who am devoted to Brahman, the holy truth of the Upanishads. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. Good morning, everyone. Today's talk is how to find our ground and calling in a world in turmoil. Now, one might think, oh, why didn't she give this talk 3 years ago, the beginning of the pandemic, when the whole world was undergoing a siege? It was terrifying and there was fear of the unknown. Well, today continues as a world in crisis. We all experienced the 3-year pandemic, and that we are just now leaving behind us, thankfully. And it was an unmatched universal crisis, one of the worst periods of a world in turmoil. When death rates soared and we feared the proximity of other human beings, not knowing whether or not they carried the deadly unseen coronavirus. But as we continue to read in the newspaper, on our Google News, we are continuing to live in a time when the horrors of unrighteous wars scorch the earth, a time when gun violence is at an all-time high, exempting no one, not even innocent school children, a time when political factions erupt in unthinkable ways, from callous name-calling to political insurrections, a time when news of famine, floods, droughts, disease, poverty, and corruption overrun us, or a time of personal tragedy and loss, the loss of family, friends, our job, or a home in a natural disaster. But such times are also the times when real heroes are made. They arise from the ashes of wrongdoing and out of the smoke-filled desolation and despair we feel. Why and how? Because that is the time the human spirit is forced to turn inward. The truth is, we don't seek God at times when we're comfortable or self-satisfied. We may, to a certain extent, but it's mild, it's not intense. Remarkably, our very mental and emotional pain is what arouses and intensifies our spiritual quest and impels it forward to its fruition. And this I have seen with devotees in my 51 years in the monastic life. As I said, it may not be a war or a famine that does so. It may be a personal sorrow. When the daughter of the future lay disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, Ramchandra Datta, died. The joy he felt for his family life died with her. Many questions then arose in his mind. Does God even exist? Can anyone see God? Is it possible to enjoy the bliss of God? Sometime later, he visited Sri Ramakrishna. Ramchandra Datta described, "We did not ask any questions. As soon as the master saw us, he began to speak. Who wants God? Man weeps one jugful of tears for property, 2 jugfuls of tears for wealth and money, and 10 jugfuls of tears for wife, children, and relatives. But who sheds a teardrop for God?" Sri Ramakrishna continued, "He only finds God who wants him, who sees darkness all around without him, who feels terrible discomfort without him." Ramchandra then explained, "These words from the master solved all our problems. From that moment, he captured our hearts." How? Such words from a divine incarnation carry the dynamic power to transmit knowledge and awaken the heart. This is a property, one of the properties of a divine incarnation. Ramchandra Datta went on to become one of the great lay disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, who established the Kankaragachi Yoga Dhyana, where a portion of Sri Ramakrishna's relics were installed, and then became a future Math of the Ramakrishna mission. But closer to our time, we find inspiration from the famous example of Pema Chodron. In a Bill Moyers TV interview, Pema Chodron, Buddhist teacher, author, and nun, was asked what inspired her spiritual journey. She said it was the moment her husband asked her for a divorce. She was so shocked and so enraged by his infidelity that she actually picked up a stone and threw it at him. It took 3 to 5 years to recover from the shock of losing her husband. She revealed that during that time, she endured a sense of groundlessness. It was a dark period in which she discovered the creative power of negativity. The creative power of negativity. Suffering led her on an inward journey, her conversion to Buddhism. And without her personal sorrow, she admitted she would not have struggled to reach mental peace. It was that bout with negativity and her own deep sense of groundlessness that was at the very core of her spiritual transformation. So through the centuries, tribulation has been at the core. It has been the foundation upon which saints have arisen. Yes, that is the core of their inspiration. The prospect of death serves as a sharp sword that pierces through the veil of this world illusion and summons greatness to manifest within the human spirit. Al-Halaj, Al-Haq, the truth, one of the 99 names of Allah, God with attributes. The Sufi, the great Sufi saint, Al-Halaj, during his trances would proclaim, Ana al-Haq, I am the truth. And when tortured and put to death for this heresy, he never stopped smiling in ecstasy as he uttered that dictum. So spiritual truth, spiritual realization itself triumphs any act of violence. But again, it is also the antidote to a world in turmoil. The Dalai Lama recognized this symbiotic relationship when he said, "Without inner peace, there can be no world peace." So yes, self-realization can transform us, and by association, the world around us. Swami Asheshananda, disciple of Holy Mother, once said to his congregation, "With illumination, you become a blessing to yourself and a blessing to those around you." Furthermore, this inner peace, this self-realization also transforms how we see the world. But what is that peace? Palden Gyatso, for 33 years, he was imprisoned by the Chinese, but he drew deeply on the Buddhist practice of Tonlen, the practice of compassion, to survive his brutal treatment. When he was released in 1992, he went to live in Dharamsala, India. And Gyatso was asked by the Dalai Lama what he most feared during that period. And he answered, "My biggest fear was that I would lose my compassion for my torturer. That I would lose my compassion for my torturer." He never bore any resentment toward them. In the case of this monk, compassion was not just a virtue. It was a wellspring of spirituality within him that fed and safeguarded his ground of being and the way he saw the world. So the strength of his spiritual practice elevated, transported, sustained, and protected him from fear and despair. It protected him from all weakness and bore the power to bestow compassion even on his enemies. Now we also see how the Jews who underwent internment in the Nazi concentration camps, they arose to champion their horrifying externals as they drew on the living wellspring of their inner spiritual lives. Viktor Frankl, in his famous book, wrote, "We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts comforting us, comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way of being." In Frankl's case, the will to meaning was, as Nietzsche expressed, "He who has a why to live for, can bear almost any how." So suffering is championed when one dissolves one's small self into a higher purpose. But that higher purpose can only emerge from the bedrock of a sound philosophical premise. It's absolutely mandatory. And we in Vedanta get to question that premise. Not only get to, but it is demanded of us. To own that premise, we have to question it. We have to deconstruct it and figure it out for ourselves before we accept it blindly. So this is not based on mere theology or blind belief, but for us as Vedantins, it's based on great spiritual dictums, the 4 Mahavakyas that come from self-realization. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. It may not even be our own realization or experience, but we can own the realizations of those seers whom we trust unconditionally and revere, and then make their realizations our own by studying and grasping the sound logic that substantiates their experiences and in turn fortifies our own faith and brings it to life in the grand philosophy of Advaita Vedanta. So these truths, not only of the nature of the world, but how to transcend the world, are available to all, including the famed warrior Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So here in the Bhagavad Gita, we see firsthand how spirituality can unfold amidst the horrors of war. So what does the Bhagavad Gita give us? A worldview backed up by science, a liberating self-view of the innate divinity within each and every one of us, a yogic insight into the reservoir and repository of power within ourselves, and a practical method to purify ourselves. So what is the Vedanta's worldview? Adi Shankara, the Indian seer philosopher who systematized Advaita Vedanta in the 7th century AD, explained, Brahman, the absolute existence, knowledge, and bliss, is real. The universe is not real. Brahman and Atman, the individual's inner self, are one. So these three simple sentences form the basis of Advaita Vedanta. This world of Maya is a superimposition upon Brahman. This world which you and I see in our waking state is actually, to the knower of Brahman, a dream. To sages, this is not mere theory. Swami Pravrajika, my teacher, who was a disciple of Swami Brahmananda, explained in his introduction to the Vivekachudamani, the crest jewel of discrimination, Brahman remains infinite and eternally unchanged. It is not transformed into this universe. It simply appears as this universe to us in our ignorance. We superimpose the apparent world upon Brahman, just as we sometimes superimpose a snake upon the coil of a rope. In other words, Brahman is the supreme reality, and as such is more vivid than the world ordinary people like you and I see. Naren, who was later to become Swami Vivekananda, went to Sri Ramakrishna and asked, Sir, have you seen God? And Sri Ramakrishna replied with characteristic sincerity and power, yes, I have seen God. I have seen him more tangibly than I see you. And Naren was speechless. Sri Ramakrishna was an uncommon master of Advaita Vedanta. He lived 6 months in the bliss of Brahman, the highest samadhi, which is impossible. Even for an ordinary human being who attains that state, which is extraordinary, they can live only 21 days in that. And one of the Swamis in our order, Swami Sarvagatananda, who was the former head of the Boston and Providence centers, he joined the order in Kankal, where we had our order, one of the first hospitals in the order. And he wanted to test this statement of Sri Ramakrishna. And a few sadhus were brought in that state. And he went to their bedside, day 1, day 2, day 12, day 15, day 18, 19, 20, 21. The truth of the Master's words were revealed to him. So this is an uncommon state. Scientists agree that there is a reality that we cannot perceive through our five senses. To quote Fitzroy Capra, who was so popular in the 70s with his Tao of Physics, he opened our eyes with his best-selling book, The Tao of Physics, an exploration of the parallels between modern physics and Eastern mysticism. He explained, the exploration of the subatomic world has revealed a reality which repeatedly transcends language and reasoning. Scientists had arrived at the brink of the metaphysical realm. Capra later discussed his ideas, which he shared with Werner Heisenberg in 1972. He wrote, I had several discussions with Heisenberg. He described, I lived in England then, around 1972, and I visited him several times in Munich and showed him the whole manuscript, meaning the Tao of Physics, chapter by chapter. He was very interested and very open. And he told me something that I think is not known publicly because he never published it. He said that he was well aware of these parallels. Capra continued, while he was working on the quantum theory, Heisenberg went to India to lecture and was a guest of Rabindranath Tagore. He talked a lot about Tagore, about Indian philosophy. Heisenberg told me, meaning Capra, that these talks had helped him a lot with his work in physics because they showed him that all these new ideas in quantum physics were in fact not all that crazy. He realized there was in fact a whole culture that subscribed to very similar ideas. Heisenberg said that this was a great help for him. Niels Bohr had a similar experience when he went to China. So peering beneath the surface of matter with the most sophisticated instruments of perception available, they found energy to be the common denominator of this universe. That energy is indestructible and is the essence of matter. Now, Vedanta sages and Western scientists do not say that the world is a false reality. No. Nor do they say that the world does not exist. No. Instead, they agree that we do not completely know the world. The nuclear physicist Otto Frisch once explained, even looking at a molecule is apt to alter its course. What does that mean to a layperson? The scientist ceases to be a mere observer as his or her very presence disturbs the phenomena they are observing. So this is the point where science ends and religion begins. By admitting that human perception distorts reality, we can then only truly know the nature of reality by becoming one with it. The scientist thus disqualifies himself from the knowledge of the reality revealed to the sages. By stilling their minds, controlling their senses, and refocusing their mental faculties within, sages penetrated deeper into the nature of the world and realized the underlying ground of all being, including energy, or what we in Vedanta would call prana. Satchit Ananda, existence, knowledge, and bliss is the common denominator of this universe. So why does this philosophy matter? What are the corollaries of this truth? How do they relate to us personally? The first corollary of the nature of Brahman is the nature of Maya, pertaining to both the world and to the individual. What is the Vedantan's worldview? Swami Prabhupananda's introduction to the crest jewel of discrimination, the Viveka Chudamani, describes Maya from the standpoint of the world. He wrote, when Shankara says that the world of thought and matter is not real, he does not mean that it is non-existent. The world appearance is and is not. In the state of ignorance, our everyday consciousness, it is experienced. And it exists as it appears. However, in the state of illumination, it is not experienced and it ceases to exist. Therefore, God does not transform himself into creation in our tradition, a creation wherein the law of causation operates. Otherwise, such a God could not be regarded as infinite. Thus, Vedanta explains that salvation cannot come through a perfect creation, which is a world illusion. If we ask, why does God permit evil? It's as misleading as asking, why does God permit good? As Swami Prabhupada further explained in his commentary, it cannot be properly said that Brahman is good in any personal sense of the word. Brahman is not good in the sense that Christ was good, for Christ's goodness was within Maya. His life expressed the light of reality reflected upon the relative world. The supreme reality itself, meaning Brahman, is beyond all phenomena, even the noblest. Then what about Ishvara, the personal God, the ruler of Maya? Is he a lawgiver? We might well ask that. Again, the answer is no. Prabhupada clarifies. The doctrine of karma is a doctrine of absolute automatic justice. The circumstances of our lives, our pains and our pleasures are all the result of our past actions in this and countless previous existence from a beginningless time. We get exactly what we earn, no more and no less. Then we come to the individual. How does Maya, illusion, pertain to the individual, we ask? We need to make this personal. Vedanta explains that Maya superimposes the ego idea on our higher self. Our sense of amness, isness that emanates from the heart, which then causes us to reach out and identify ourselves with this body and mind rather than our true nature, the Atman within. Thus, the work of Maya is twofold. It is both manifest in this world illusion, this apparent universe superimposed on Brahman, and also our false ego is superimposed on our true nature. In other words, all this time, you and I have been seeing only Brahman, but we are unaware of it. Just as we are ignorant of our true nature, which is nearer than the nearest. What then does the nature of Maya mean for our spiritual life when we as aspirants are forced to face a world in turmoil? How can we make this practical? First, Vedanta says our salvation cannot be found in this world, for the world has been likened to a dog's curly tail. Those of you who have read the gospel are familiar with this story. Once we straighten it, it kinks up again. It will never become a utopia, this world. Now, is this life negating? We may well ask. No, because Yoga Vedanta teaches us that by helping others, we're really helping ourselves spiritually to evolve towards perfection. And this is the basis of karma yoga, selfless service with no egotistic thought that we are doing good to the world. I am doing good to the world. No. About the nature of the world, Swami Vivekananda gave the following example. Once there was a poor man who wanted money so badly that he sought the help of a yogi of great powers, whom he knew could provide him with a ghost. But why do you want a ghost? The yogi sage asked him. The poor man beseeched him, I want a ghost that can work for me. Disgusted, the sage replied, take this charm, repeat this magic mantra, and a ghost will come. Whatever you command, he'll do. But beware, ghosts are terrible beings and must be continually kept busy. Otherwise, they will take your life. The man replied, oh, that's easy. I can give my ghost lots of work that will last for a lifetime. So after repeating day and night the magic mantra, a huge ghost finally appeared before the poor man and announced, I've been conquered by your magic, but you must keep me constantly employed or I'll kill you. So the man quickly ordered, build me a palace. And the ghost replied in a flash, it's done. The palace is built. Bring me money, ordered the man. Here's your money, said the ghost. Then cut down the forest and build a city in its place. That's done, the ghost replied. Anything more? Suddenly the poor man was seized with fear and realized he had no more work for the ghost. His life was in danger. Give me something to do or I'll devour you, the ghost shouted at him. The poor man somehow managed to run to the sage, remember this is a story, and cried, please protect me. I have nothing more to give the ghost to do, and he's threatening to eat me alive. Just then the ghost arrived and growled, yes, I'll devour you right now. The sage then quickly advised the poor man, I've got a solution for you. See that dog with the curly tail? With your sword, quickly cut off its tail and then give it to the ghost to straighten. The man quickly cut off the dog's tail and gave it to the ghost, saying, straighten this tail for me. The ghost took it and slowly, carefully straightened it. But as soon as he let go, it curled up again. Once more, he laboriously straightened it, only to find that again it curled up as soon as he let it go. Again he tried, but again and again the tail curled up. Exhausted, the ghost said, I'm a veteran ghost, but never before have I been in such a predicament. So let's make a compromise. Relieve me of this task of straightening the dog's tail, and I'll let you keep all that I have given you and will promise not to harm you. So this is the original story. The man was relieved and quickly accepted the ghost's offer. Swami Vivekananda explained, this world is like a dog's curly tail, and people have been striving to straighten it out for hundreds of years, but when they let it go, it is curled up again. How could it be otherwise? So we see that there can be no salvation in this world of Maya. It is like the dog's curly tail. So our spiritual task must then be to transcend this world of Maya. Yes, nothing short of that. And it is possible. As our teachers have said, it is possible. It does work, my child. It does work. So what does that look like? Or is this just a dry philosophical proposition? Swami Brahmananda once told Swami Pravrajika that one day Swami Vivekananda, he, and several other brother disciples were seated on the western veranda of Belur Math. Suddenly, Swamiji said to Maharaj, Raja, meaning Maharaj, Swami Brahmananda, don't you see Brahman? Brahman is everywhere. Maharaj said that Swamiji's spiritual awareness was so intense that their minds were lifted up immediately and they saw Brahman everywhere. But how can we transcend this world? Vivekananda tells us through the 4 yogas. In the case of the poor man and the ghost, one must first know how to work without attachment. Then one will find genuine peace and perfection. And we'll elaborate on this in our third corollary of the 4 yogas later in this talk. The second corollary reveals how Brahman and Maya relate to us, you and I, internally on a personal spiritual level. In the world, an ordinary person sees distinct objects and people as flesh and blood, whereas the seer of Vedanta, a jnani and a Advaitin, who practices the path of discrimination, neti neti atma, Brahman alone is real, all else is unreal. For them, the world opens up and ultimately they see all people in superconscious vision as so many glass houses, as it were, with the light of the Atman within. But the glass house itself, the material form, is something to be negated. In other words, if Vivekananda or Sri Ramakrishna or Sarada Devi were to walk through these doors, they would see you. They would see the real you. Your form would disappear. They would see that self, that inner reality of which you are. On the other hand, and this is a jnani, a vijnani, a jnani who furthers his or her sadhana by then practicing and realizing not neti neti atma, but iti iti, all this is verily Brahman, sees no distinct forms, but everything as consciousness, including you and I. So we may well ask ourselves, what would it feel like for us to be seen in such a way by an illumined soul? It touches the heart. It awakens the heart and elevates the mind of those who come into contact with such souls. And we read about such occurrences in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, Sarada Devi, and the direct disciples. In the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, Ramakrishna explained these 2 levels of superconscious vision, which he shared with the devotees in his room. He said, do you know what I see right now? He said, I see that it is God himself who has become all this. It seems to me that men and other living beings are made of leather, and that it is God himself who, dwelling inside these leather cases, moves the hands, the feet, the heads. He continued, I had a similar vision once before when I saw houses, gardens, roads, men, cattle, all made of one substance, meaning pure consciousness. It was as if they were all made of wax. Now, if we were to be in the presence of such a soul, that look of theirs would transform us. We would feel it pull our heart, awaken our heart, and we would have some kind of a transcendent experience ourselves. Such is the force of these visionaries. So in other words, what these two visions tell us is that forms vary, but consciousness remains the underlying substance of all. The Jnani sees the reality of Brahman in all forms, whereas the Vijnani sees the reality of Brahman as all forms. Sri Ramakrishna also used to give the example of a glass house to make his point. The Jnani sees people as glass houses with an interior light shining through the glass. But the glass, the form, is something to be negated. Whereas a Vijnani also sees people as glass houses. But even the glass house is an appearance of light, consciousness. So the Vijnani sees form as Brahman. He sees form itself as a pulsation of consciousness. So that is what it would be like to be in the presence of Sri Ramakrishna, Sarada Devi, Swami Vivekananda, and any of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, or of a Buddha, or of a Christ. Imagine what it would be like to be in the presence of a knower of Brahman, who could see our true nature. It would be transformative, just as it was for those who came within the orbit of Sri Ramakrishna, Sarada Devi, and the direct disciples. And when you read their lives, you begin to kind of experience their experience vicariously. That is the wonderful advantage of taking holy company and reading the lives of these wonderful masters. So then, the second corollary of the nature of Brahman is the divinity of all and the divinity within all. So what is this divinity within all? At the center of Vivekananda's message to the world was the vision of divinity of every being. But today we may ask, how can that be when people are capable of doing such horrendous deeds and there is so much evil in the world? Every day we read of war atrocities, crimes against fellow human beings, corruption, and political mean-spiritedness. Swami Atmarupananda, whom many of you have met here, a senior monk and Vedanta scholar, explained so eloquently. He described, Swami Vivekananda would never deny that people do terrible things, but he saw that such acts do not spring from an evil inherent in human nature, but from ignorance of one's true nature, the ignorance of the nature of the world and of other beings, an ignorance which, yes, can lead to terrible suffering for many, but ignorance nevertheless. The murderer kills because he thinks that it is justified, perhaps because it will remove suffering or bring happiness, or perhaps because the person deserves it. None of those justifications are true, and that is the product of ignorance. But second, when the mind and heart are purified, we can actually perceive the innate divinity within ourselves and also within others. That is the corollary of seeing the divine within oneself. Yes, one can doubt this last statement, but such doubt is opposed by the experience of many sages, women and men through the ages, East and West. It forms the bedrock of the Vedanta philosophy, which the Swami taught. It is the realization behind his statement, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. This sentence alone would save mankind if all books and prophets were lost, Vivekananda said. See all as the self and love all, that all idea of separateness go. Third, If we begin to perceive this inner reality, we feel in harmony with all. And we find room in our vision even for the evils in human life. Nothing shocks us. Not because we don't care, but because everything finds its place. And because we see something behind this drama of life. We see the immensity of the ocean and not just the waves on the surface of life. In this connection, Swami Pravrajika once reminded us in a monastic class that there are different levels of seeing. He then described the higher level of the seeing of a seer who faces a world in turmoil. During fierce warfare, as the opposing army engaged with Rama's army, Lord Rama allowed Hanuman to climb onto his back. And what did he see? Hanuman saw Rama slaying Rama. So this brings us to the fourth corollary, the four yogas. The first of the four yogas is Jnana Yoga, owning the Vedanta truths we have laid out at the beginning of this talk. And this means work, as again, questioning, trying to reason out within ourselves these wonderful truths. Owning it means to try to feel it within ourselves, trying to practice it within ourselves. The assertion, aham brahmasmi. In other words, living this truth and breathing this reality into every thought and action. Not just word, not just lip service, but trying to live our life according to those dictums. God is not punishing us with war, a pandemic, climate change, mass shootings, corruption. God is not doing this to us. This universe just is. The jnani does not interact with the diversity of the world, but with the unity behind the diversity. How? As the witness. In Vivekananda's own words, then alone you will find that this world is but a dream. Then alone you will realize in the soul of your soul that you are but actors and the world is a stage. Then alone will the ideas of non-attachment come to you with the power of thunder. Then all this thirst for enjoyment, this clinging on to life and this world will vanish forever. Second, Vivekananda's Karma Yoga. It was his greatest work, a dimension of which was worship of what he called the living God. Why, he would ask, should you build temples and churches, images and altars when the living God is ever there before us? Vivekananda, of course, we do have temples and centers, but we also serve the living God. Vivekananda asserted, the only God to worship is the human soul in the human body. If I cannot worship in that, no other temple will be of any advantage. The moment I have realized God sitting in the temple of every human body, the moment I stand in reverence before every human being and see God in him, in that moment, I am free from bondage. Everything that binds vanishes and I am free. So, when we can try to purify our mind and find the core of our being to be pure and luminous, we will also then see the same reality within every being. This is not one-fold, this is twofold. When we find that center of our being, we see this also in others. It is a wonderful, wonderful truth. And so our spiritual growth is first respect and then worship. As Vivekananda asserted, work for work's sake, There are some who are really the salt of the earth in every country and who work for work's sake, who do not care for name and fame or even to go to heaven. They work just because good will come of it. There are others who do good to the poor and help mankind from still higher motives because they believe in doing good and love good. If a man works without any selfish motive in view, does he not gain anything? Yes, he gains the highest. But the point is working without any selfish motive. And that means complete control of the mind. Here we're again reminded of Viktor Frankl's reminiscence of the Jews in the Nazi concentration camp, and the stark truth that he who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. We transcend the how. That's why. For the Vedantin, it is the why of the living God and serving that living God that brings us freedom, no matter what our station in life or our circumstances. Vivekananda said, "Let us give up this foolish talk of doing good to the world. It is not waiting for your or my help, yet we must work and constantly do good because it is a blessing to ourselves. That is the only way we can become perfect." No beggar whom we have helped has ever owed a single cent to us. We owe everything to him because he has allowed us to exercise our charity to him. It is entirely wrong to think, and this is Vivekananda, that we have done or can do good to the world, or to think that we have helped such and such people. It is a foolish thought, and all foolish thoughts bring misery. We think that we have helped some man and expect him to thank us, and because he does not, unhappiness comes to us. Why should we expect anything in return for what we do? Be grateful, Vivekananda tells us, to the man you help. Think of him as God. Is it not a great privilege to be allowed to worship God by helping our fellow man? And this I have seen with my own eyes. Those who have really served others as a living God, it gives us thrills to see that. It emanates through every pore of their being. And so this grand outlook is forged and fortified by a life of meditation and prayer, Raja and Bhakti yogas. In Raja Yoga, by controlling the mind and senses, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras tell us how. And through mindfulness practice, we realize we are not the mind. We can never be that which we can perceive. Our thoughts, desires, worries, fears, we are not that. We can feel them, we can see them. Science tells us that which we can perceive is material. This mind is matter. So with a calm and steadied mind, we can then enter deeper into the core of our being, which is the heart. The core of where our eye sense comes from, our amnas. As the Chandogya Upanishad states, as large as the universe outside, even so large is the universe within the lotus of the heart. Within it are heaven and earth, the sun, the moon, the lightning, and all the stars. What is in the macrocosm is in the microcosm. There is an inner space within the heart which contains the entire universe, and beyond that, the sum total of reality. If we think of that one truth, how expansive we feel. Imagine the strength that comes from even the practice of such revelation, how it reorders our perspective and recenters our consciousness as a holding vessel. There can be no victimhood with such a practice. Fear becomes a mere phantom. Then we finally come to the practice of devotion, bhakti yoga. Our chosen ideal, the symbol of pure consciousness, is the container of that universe. We begin by meditating on the form of God. Then, as Swami Brahmananda explains, we gradually enter deeper into the vast isness of our being he described. As you meditate on your chosen ideal, think of him as bright and effulgent, and that everything shines because of his light. Think of him as living and conscious. And as you continue thus, the form of your chosen ideal will gradually melt into the formless, into the infinite. Then will follow a vivid sense of the living presence, until finally the eye of wisdom will open and the infinite will be directly perceived, far beyond this universe. Brahmananda asserted, the presence of God must be realized everywhere. He who is personal and has form is also impersonal and without form. He dwells in all beings. He pervades land and water, hills and valleys, sky and stars. He pervades all things. Yes, even in a world in turmoil, it is for us to but seek within and find this truth for ourselves.